Greetings, everyone. I want to talk to you guys about the new European Union that is currently forming. When we talk about the European Union, there are a lot of very, very angry opinions that get expressed. The European Union is evil, it's communist, it's socialist, it's demonic, it's the Antichrist. Yes, Brexit. Brexit is great. Support Brexit. But yet, I think a lot of people who support Brexit don't really know what dangerous consequences lie as a result of leaving the European Union. So, to give you guys an example that we have pretty much all heard, the United States military had a very strong presence in Iraq for years. And then the United States decided to leave Iraq. Well, what happened? The American military presence in Iraq was really the only stabilizing force left. The NATO military presence, because there were other militaries there. The NATO military presence in Iraq was the only thing left that was keeping Iraq somewhat stable. And then once the United States left Iraq, you had ISIS, and the destabilization got a lot worse. It was bad even when the American soldiers were there. There were a lot of problems, but it got a hell of a lot worse once the Americans pulled out of that country. So Germany caused 2 world wars, and it took a lot of different militaries to stop the Germans. You had the British, the Russians. You had a lot of French fighters. In World War I, it was the French army, and then in World War II, there were a lot of the French resistance fighters. You had the Americans, the Canadians. They were a lot of armies that had to fight against the Germans. The Germans were eventually crushed in the Second World War, and the Americans decided to occupy Germany and really run the world, because it's like, well, America is the reason why the Nazis lost, so America's going to run the world, and we are living in the American empire. But the Americans wanted to make sure that they could make a lot of money out of the Germans, and knowing that the Germans were a very industrial people, the Americans aided the re-industrialization of Germany in order to have the American greenback be backed by a strong German currency in Europe. We did the same thing with the Japanese. We wanted the American greenback to be strengthened by the Japanese currency. It's why both Japan and Germany were able to recover so quickly after the Second World War, especially after Japan survived 2 nuclear attacks. It's quite remarkable how fast it took them to recover. And a lot of that was with the help of the United States. So, the European Union was formed, and people have there are valid criticisms of the European Union. I'm not here to say that the European Union is perfect, okay? But what I will say is that the concept of the EU was to prevent another Second World War from happening. And by prevent, I mean satisfying the Europeans with a strong economy, a free market, free trade. I meant to say free trade, not free market. Free trade. And as long as the Germans were financially satisfied, because they are the biggest economy in the European bloc, the Germans would be peaceful. But what happens when you remove that system? What happens when you jeopardize it or sabotage it or give off the sign that the EU is declining? What happens? The Germans will return to militarism. And this is what I have been warning about since the night of Brexit. I remember when the vote was going to happen, the referendum for Brexit was going to take place in 2016. I remember that night as if it was yesterday, because it was something that I was focused on a lot. And I knew that Britain was going to vote yes. I just had the feeling that the English wanted out of the European Union more so than the other British countries. And I knew it was going to happen. It was intuitively, it was just made sense to me. A lot of that had to do, I think, with all of the the anti Islam comments that I was reading on Facebook by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds from British people. It's like, well, yeah, these people hate the European Union. You can learn a lot from Facebook and Twitter about the state of a society. But when Brexit was voted on and it was conclusive that the British, by and large, voted yes to exit from the EU, I spent all night writing an article. I drank a very strong cup of black tea, cold black tea, to keep myself up, and I wrote that damn article, and that article is still on the internet, and that was back in 2016. And I warned that this is going to lead to a more powerful Germany. The British who were supportive of Brexit argued that they voted for Brexit in order to basically flip the bird to the elites in Brussels, the faceless bureaucrats in Brussels, and they were going to tell the elites to piss off. But what they actually did was they gave an incentive to the most powerful economy in Europe to just get more powerful. Britain was the biggest financial contributor to the EU's military defense. Because remember, it's a bloc. It's an alliance of countries within a free trade zone. It's the biggest free trade zone in the world, especially now that the EU made a deal with Japan to have free trade. Now they're even bigger. And I think Turkey also has a free trade agreement with the European Union. I could be wrong about that, but I know that the biggest buyer of Turkish goods is the EU. So economically, Turkey is very well connected with the European Union. And because Turkey has such a powerful leverage over the politics of the EU, you could almost say that Turkey is de facto already part of the European Union. But that's another argument. But Britain was the biggest contributor. And so because Britain was the biggest contributor, it had a lot of say-so as to the politics of the EU's military state. The French and the Germans for years wanted a EU, a unified pan-European military force led by France and Germany, which means it would be led by Germany because France doesn't do anything without Germany's consent. The British were always against that, and rightfully so, because the British fought the Germans in World War II, and they're like, nah, mate, you're not going to ever do that again, okay? Be nice now. And that was it. And now Britain is leaving. Their transition out of the European Union is right out of the corner, right down the corner. And they haven't really agreed on anything as far as free trade goes, as far as a free trade agreement or a trade agreement for a post EU Britain. And so there's still tensions going on between Britain and the European Union, but that's not the point. The point is that there are still tensions between the British and the Germans, and it shows with Brexit. And now that the British are leaving, the Germans are no longer going to have that obstacle. Because while the British were the biggest financial contributors to the EU, Germany overall has been the biggest economy. So now Germany has the excuse to say, well, Britain is gone. America's Anglo representative in the EU is no longer here. So we can now, we actually have to put in the monies that Britain is no longer going to pay. So now Germany wants to become the big military player in the European Union. Now, there was an article that came out very recently. It was from Reuters, and it was about a document that came out very recently from the European Union talking about how within the decade of the 2020s, they want to make a very, very powerful EU military force. Now that Britain is no longer in the EU, has no say-so over the EU, Germany can become more and more powerful. I want to read to you guys some excerpts from this article. The European Union aims to draw up a master military strategy document to define future threats, goals, and ambitions in defense, while focusing on 6 new areas of joint weapons development, including tanks, officials and diplomats said. After 4 years of hostility towards NATO by U.S. President Donald Trump, the EU, led by France, wants to become a stand-alone military power in the long term, strong enough to fight on its own and potentially a more useful ally to the United States. That more useful ally to the U.S. stuff is just a cover-up. This is about competing with the United States, which is why not too long ago the Germans were talking about creating their own, it was like their own online cloud system, basically to compete against Amazon. So this is really about competition between the Germans and the Americans, between the EU and NATO. Britain's vote in 2016 to leave the EU while depriving the Bloc of a military power has given Berlin, an opportunity to push long-standing ambitions for a bigger EU role in defense, with support from Berlin. Support from Berlin means Berlin is back in this whole thing and they're behind it. During Britain's membership, London resisted a major military role for the EU, fearing the creation of an EU army, which officials in Brussels say is not under discussion. Defense ministers will also receive the bloc's first annual review on joint capabilities on Friday, which is expected to set out 100 areas for governments to develop together from 2025 over 6 areas, including battle tanks, maritime patrol vessels, countering drones, and jamming technology. Okay, 2025. It's what I've been saying since January of 2020. The decade of the 20s is going to be a decade of militarization. It's going to be a decade of militarism, in some cases empire building. We are already seeing this with Turkey, and we're just in the first year, guys. Like, if you think that 2020 is so wacky, buddy, buckle up, because 2019 is over. The 2010s are bye-bye. We're now in the 2020s. And it's going to get rough. It's going to get crazy. It's going to get crazy, guys. And we're hitting on this decade. We're already in the first year, and we've already seen Turkey take a chunk out of land that was occupied by Armenians, Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey is deepening relations with Azerbaijan. Turkey wants to expand its Turkic Council. Turkey wants to compete with NATO. It's going to be wild. And now the Germans, the French are talking about creating this EU force. Now, what happens if the economy in the European Union gets so devastated that tons of people lose their jobs, you have a lot of unemployment? Then what happens? Populism will rise. And let's say that a populist regime takes control of the EU Parliament. Then what do you have? You have a new European Union. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen emphatically, but maybe something like this could happen. Maybe something akin to this could actually happen. Something parallel to this could actually happen. And what will you end up with? You will end up with the fourth frickin' Reich. So, yeah. You guys want to go against the elites? Well, you're about to see the rise of the dark, cyberpunk, violent, eugenist, Darwinist new elites. Or maybe they've already been here. Maybe they have been here for a long time, but they're going to reveal themselves in the future. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.